$78,000. That's the number that started a rebellion inside professional basketball. And by the time you finish hearing this, you'll understand why an entire league had to rewrite its financial rulebook because of one rookie contract that never should have existed in the first place. Stick around, because what happened next involves a secret clause with an unofficial nickname, a superstar who's furious and won't say why out loud, and a championship roster that might get torn apart by its own success. Let's get into it. Here's the truth nobody in the WNBA's press office wants printed in bold letters. The single most important contract in the history of women's professional basketball just got signed, and the name responsible for making it happen isn't written anywhere inside it. Not once. Every general manager, every agent, every union rep who spent 17 months locked in negotiations knew exactly whose shadow was hanging over that table. This is the story of how one athlete quietly rewired the entire financial structure of a professional league without ever getting formal credit for it, and how the very same people who profited most from that shift have spent 2 years acting like it isn't happening. The WNBA just finalized the largest collective bargaining agreement the sport has ever seen. Caps blew past anything fans had watched before. Minimum salaries doubled, and then some. Players who used to fly overseas every offseason just to pay rent are suddenly staring at paychecks that would have sounded like fantasy 3 years ago. Social media is flooded with celebration posts. Every outlet is calling it a landmark win for the league, for the athletes, for women's sports as a whole. And on the surface, none of that is wrong. But there's another layer to this story that doesn't fit neatly into a league press release. It's messier, more uncomfortable, and honestly, a lot more real. Because tucked inside the celebration is a looming salary crunch that's about to test one of the most talented rosters in the sport. There's a veteran champion whose quiet frustration has been simmering for 2 seasons and is now impossible to ignore. There's a provision buried in the fine print that already has an unofficial nickname across the league, one the front office will never say on the record, but everyone already whispers. And there's one player whose influence became so massive that a labor agreement had to be built around her without ever spelling out her name. So let's rewind, because this new deal didn't materialize out of nowhere. 17 months. That's how long league officials and the players' union sat across from each other, trading proposals, walking away from the table, coming back, arguing through red-eye phone calls with lawyers trying to put a price tag on something that had transformed almost overnight. The old agreement, the one governing salaries before this, was built for a completely different version of the league, one still scrapping for relevance, thankful for whatever broadcast crumbs it could get, treating a sold-out arena like a headline-worthy miracle. That league had already vanished by the time these talks got serious. Arenas that used to sit half-empty were suddenly turning fans away at the doors. TV rights packages that would have been laughed at 5 years earlier were now getting real bids from major networks. Ratings that had flatlined for a decade were breaking records week after week, crossing 1 million viewers per broadcast for the first time since 2008. And every time an executive pointed at a chart, every time a rep cited a number at the bargaining table, there was one name sitting underneath all of it. The ratings spike had a name attached to it. The ticket sales surge had a name. The jersey numbers, the social engagement, the fans who'd never watched a single possession of women's basketball before, but somehow knew the entire schedule by heart. All of it traced back to the same source. Everybody at that table knew it. The only thing left to do was decide how much it was worth in dollars. Before we get to what changed, you need to understand exactly how broken the old pay structure was, because otherwise the new numbers won't hit the way they should. In her rookie year, Caitlin Clark's WNBA salary was $78,066. Read that twice. Not a typo. That's the actual figure the Indiana Fever paid the player who, by nearly every measurable standard, was the single biggest driving force in the sport. The player whose name on a road schedule sent opposing teams' ticket sales climbing overnight. The player behind the biggest television numbers the league had seen in nearly 2 decades. The player whose merchandise was outselling everyone else by a margin that wasn't even close. And she was earning what a mid-level paralegal makes in an unremarkable office job. Meanwhile, off the court, she pulled in about $16.1 million across endorsements, appearances, and partnerships with major brands, landing her among the highest-paid female athletes on the planet. The league itself was paying her a fraction of 1% of what she was actually generating in total earnings. No serious business analyst could defend that math with a straight face. The organization was getting franchise-altering commercial value and paying rookie minimum prices for it, and everyone cashing those checks knew it. That backdrop is exactly why the new clause buried in this agreement matters so much. It's called the EPIC clause, exceptional performance on an initial contract, and what it actually does is let players still on their rookie deals fast-track their way into maximum or supermax level pay before that 4-year contract even runs out. Land a spot on an all-WNBA team while still on your rookie deal, and you qualify for the max win MVP, and the supermax opens up. And here's the part the league will never officially admit. Nowhere in that clause does Clark's name appear. It's written in the flattest, most neutral legal language imaginable: performance thresholds and eligibility triggers, textbook labor law phrasing. But every single person who sat in that negotiating room knew precisely who this language was designed for. It exists because of a very specific, very real situation. A player driving unprecedented commercial value for the league while still locked into a salary written for an entirely different era. Reporters have already nicknamed it, drawing a direct comparison to the NBA's old Rose Rule, the provision built around Derrick Rose that let young stars access bigger money after winning MVP or making an All-NBA team. The WNBA essentially copied that blueprint for the same reason. They just didn't want to put a face on it publicly. What this means in real terms: Clark's salary jumps from $78,000 to $530,000 in 2026. That's a 500% raise. And before anyone starts applauding the league for finally catching up, hold on, because $500,000 is still, by any honest measure, one of the most undervalued contracts anywhere in professional sports. A player generating that kind of broadcast value, filling arenas across the country, and single-handedly driving the league's biggest growth spurt in a decade is still earning far less than her actual worth. It's progress. It's just progress that arrived a few seasons late. And if she wins MVP this year, things escalate fast. Under the EPIC clause, an MVP season would push her straight into supermax territory immediately, forcing the league to pay its most marketable athlete something closer to her real value, all while trying to build a title-contending roster around her under a cap that, despite being record-setting, still isn't nearly big enough to make roster building easy. That new cap sits at $7 million. After years of the league working with a total cap around $1.5 million, $7 million sounds massive. It sounds like a genuine turning point for the business side of the sport. And in a lot of ways, it is. Minimum salaries now sit above $300,000. The average player's salary has jumped from around $120,000 to over $600,000. For athletes who used to grind through foreign leagues every offseason just to survive financially, this agreement is genuinely transformative. But here's what isn't making the headlines. $7 million sounds enormous right up until you actually try to build a competitive roster with it. And Indiana is staring down a math problem that's going to define the franchise for years. Start with Clark's $530,000. That's already over 7% of the entire cap before a second player signs anything. Then factor in Kelsey Mitchell. If Indiana uses its core designation to keep her, her salary jumps to roughly $1.4 million under the new rules. A supermax deal she's absolutely earned, but one that eats up 20% of the team's total cap space on a player who isn't even Clark. Then there's Aliyah Boston, who's max eligible this offseason and has been one of the most consistently productive players in the league since she was drafted. Every dollar she earns comes straight out of that same $7 million pool too. Add in a forward rotation still needing depth, a backup point guard, bench pieces, the kind of roster depth that separates teams who make noise in the playoffs from teams that actually win it all, and the arithmetic gets brutal fast. Clark, Mitchell, and Boston alone, 3 players, before a single other roster spot is filled, would eat up more than half the entire salary cap. That's the definition of a cap squeeze, and it's exactly the kind of situation that has broken promising rosters across every major professional league once the franchise player finally gets paid what she's worth. It doesn't stop there. Sophie Cunningham would likely need to accept something close to the league minimum to stay in Indiana, which is no guarantee. Lexi Hull, a name a lot of casual fans haven't clocked yet, has seen her market value climb high enough that she could realistically pull offers around $600,000 elsewhere. Exactly the kind of quiet departure that dismantles a roster that looked unbeatable on paper. Indiana's front office is facing decisions with zero historical precedent to lean on. Every number is brand new. Every mistake will show up in the win column. Now let's talk about Kelsey Mitchell specifically, because her role in all this gets consistently underrated nationally. She isn't a complimentary piece who benefits from playing next to a star. She's one of the most dangerous, versatile scoring guards in the entire league, someone who finished top 4 in MVP voting last season and can create offense from literally anywhere on the floor. Without Clark on that roster, Mitchell is almost certainly the face of the franchise. Under the old deal, Indiana used a core designation to lock her into a one-year contract heading into last season, a move that kept her in Indianapolis but set up exactly the tension the front office faces right now. With her market value at an all-time high under this new agreement, chasing a supermax deal worth $1.4 million is the obviously correct move for her financially, and nobody should blame her for prioritizing that after watching this league underpay its stars for years. But if Indiana locks that number in long term, the cap math around everything else gets brutally tight. Some analysts argue Indiana should try a shorter deal with Mitchell instead of a long-term commitment. And it's not about undervaluing her. It's about timing, because 1 year from now, Clark becomes max eligible at $1.3 million, and the year after that, her supermax kicks in at $1.7 million. The real question facing Indiana's front office is simple to state and nearly impossible to solve. How do you pay every deserving player fairly when even the biggest cap in league history still can't cover what your best players have genuinely earned? There's no clean answer here, only trade-offs. And whatever trade-offs Indiana makes over the next year will determine whether Clark's prime seasons are spent chasing championships or watching a talented roster slowly erode around her. The pressure on that front office right now isn't coming from failure. It's coming from success, which might be even harder to manage. And then there's Aliyah Wilson. No honest breakdown of this new deal, this epic clause, or this financial shift in the league is complete without talking about what she's going through right now, because her situation is genuinely layered and deserves more nuance than a quick take. Wilson has 3 MVP trophies, an Olympic gold medal, and a league championship. She's built one of the most decorated resumes in the sport's history and spent years publicly advocating for exactly the kind of pay equity this new deal delivers. She fought for this, and now that it's here, the headline story out of the entire agreement is that a player with 2 seasons of professional experience is about to become the highest-paid athlete in league history. That's not an easy pill to swallow, no matter how many championships you've won or how secure your legacy is. Watching someone else step directly into commercial opportunities the system never offered you, after spending years building the very foundation that made those opportunities possible, creates a specific kind of frustration that doesn't disappear with a celebratory press release. Wilson has chosen her public words carefully, pointed enough that anyone paying attention understands exactly what's underneath them, without ever naming names directly. When outlets published year-end rankings of the highest-paid female athletes, Clark showed up near the top of the list. Wilson wasn't on it. Not because she isn't an elite player, she absolutely is, but because her dominance on the court never translated into the same kind of commercial machine. She never triggered a national trending topic from a regular season Tuesday night game. She never caused ticket sales to spike in an opposing city just by showing up on the schedule. Those aren't insults. They're just 2 very different types of impact, and this new deal is built to compensate one of them far more heavily than the other. That's the uncomfortable part nobody wants to say plainly. This agreement doesn't distribute money based on championships or MVP trophies or the years someone spent fighting for a better league while getting paid almost nothing. It distributes money based on measurable market impact. The epic clause exists because certain players fundamentally change what the league is worth to sponsors, networks, and casual fans who've never sat courtside but suddenly won't miss a broadcast. Wilson built this league from the ground up. Clark monetized it at a scale nobody saw coming. And leagues growing this fast tend to prioritize that second kind of impact in their pay structure, even when it creates the exact kind of uncomfortable inequity Wilson is dealing with right now. Her frustration is completely valid. It doesn't make the epic clause unfair, It's simply responding to a specific, documented reality that has a name attached to every spreadsheet in the league office, even if that name never shows up in the actual contract language. So where does this leave the next 3 years? In 2026, Clark earns $530,000, signed, contractually locked in, and still, realistically, one of the best value contracts in professional sports today. The gap between what she generates and what she's actually paid is shrinking, but it hasn't closed, not even close. This number is a first step toward fairness, not the finish line, but it's a step the league refused to take just 12 months ago. In 2027, everything shifts again. She becomes eligible for a maximum contract worth $1.3 million, and if the last 2 years are any indication, that extension gets signed with plenty of fanfare and very little resistance. The headlines will call it historic. The number will feel massive compared to where this league started, and it still won't fully reflect what she's worth to every network, sponsor, and arena that sells out the second her name hits the schedule. Then in 2028, the Supermax kicks in at $1.7 million, sparking a fresh round of debate. Veterans who spent years underpaid will react. Columnists will dissect the widening gap between top earners and everyone else. And the league will simultaneously celebrate the milestone while quietly managing the fallout of a pay structure still catching up to the reality it just admitted to. Every raise reopens the same conversation. Every increase is both a genuine win and a reminder of exactly how long it took to get there. Through all of it, Indiana will be navigating a salary structure that's historically generous by WNBA standards and ruthlessly tight by the standards of building an actual title contender. The cap squeeze is real. The roster decisions ahead are going to be painful. Some players who deserve to stay won't. Some depth the team took for granted will quietly walk out the door. This is the standard life cycle every franchise goes through once it's built around a generational talent. And Indiana is about to live through every single stage of it in real time. What makes this entire situation genuinely unprecedented isn't just the dollar figures. It's the fact that one player's presence forced an entire institution to confront exactly what it had been getting wrong for years. That $78,000 salary didn't become a scandal because someone leaked a memo. It became a scandal because the numbers surrounding it, the ratings, the endorsement figures, the attendance reports, made it impossible to keep ignoring. The league got caught paying its most valuable asset at a rate no serious business conversation could defend, and the only real response was 17 months of negotiation that produced a document built to make sure it never happens the same way again. The epic clause is that document. Whatever nickname people attach to it publicly or privately, it's the league's written admission that change wasn't optional anymore. And the numbers themselves, 78,000, 530,000, 1.3 million, 1.7 million, tell that entire story in the most honest language institutions know how to speak, contract language. So here's where all of this actually lands. This new agreement is a genuine milestone. The players who spent years fighting for better pay, better conditions, better facilities moved this league forward, and that deserves real credit. The veterans who never got what they were worth, who played through the old system anyway, and kept showing up, built the foundation this entire moment stands on. That's true. And Caitlin Clark is the economic engine that forced ownership to finally open the checkbook. That's also true. Both of those things can exist at the same time. You don't have to pick one side and dismiss the other. The league's veterans built something worth fighting for, and one rookie arrived and made it impossible for the people signing the checks to look away any longer. Nobody serious is still debating whether she matters financially to this league. The epic clause is proof. A salary jump from $78,000 to $500,000 is proof. A cap that grew nearly 400% during her tenure is proof. The argument ended the moment the lawyers started typing. Every time an owner who'd resisted moving on salary finally caved at that table, whether it was the cap figure, the housing stipend, or revenue sharing, the reason was always the same, and that reason had a name attached to it. The league that once paid its most transformative player an entry-level office salary doesn't exist anymore. What's replaced it is a league that finally put it in writing, officially, on paper, exactly what it has on its hands, and is still figuring out what that admission is going to cost. One roster in Indianapolis is about to feel every ounce of that weight. And somewhere in the middle of all this, A player who's never once had her name written into a collective bargaining agreement has quietly reshaped every single line of it. So here's the real question heading into next season. Does Indiana find a way to hold this roster together through a cap squeeze nobody's ever navigated before? Or does the very success that created this problem end up tearing it apart before Clark ever gets a real shot at a championship? Drop your take below, and if you're new here, stick around, because this story is only getting started.